Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Kathy Bjork. She is a retired teacher after 35 years, and she's here to describe and explain her new book. Can you say hi, Kathy?
Hi, glad to be here.
I appreciate what you're writing about. The book is My Mother is Losing Her Memory, and I Am Losing My Mind. Parenting an Aging Parent. I'm sure that was very difficult to deal with.
It was, and it's getting more as our population is aging. We're having more people that are having dementia, and it's really a concern because it takes a lot of money to help these people, and they, through society, with our medication, costs and everything. So.
There's so many, I guess, points that cause dementia. They don't know if there's a one thing, right? Everybody's different, and it could be. Is it related to age, you think, or food?
Well, they say that it isn't necessarily come with age, but age is a factor because as we get older, our body starts breaking down, and I guess, the brain is affected too. But they've talked about, like, what can you do? People, they always ask me when I'm doing presentations, what can I do to help prevent it? Well, you can't really necessarily prevent it, but you can help. And there's like 6 pillars that they talk about of helping. And it really is the way people should be, living their life anyway. It's a good diet, get exercise, social interaction, don't just sit home. That helps.
That's
And
true.
then stimulation of your brain. They say, do little puzzles, but it can be like if you read or if you're researching something, if you have a hobby, stimulate your brain, get good sleep. And if you do have stresses, we all have stresses in our life, find ways to deal with it, whether it's meditation or taking a walk or, getting out in nature. Those are things that can help.
That is really true. And as you were talking, it made me think of the word empathy. We need to have empathy for people like you who are helping their parents and the people that are in that healthcare field dealing with dementia patients. And I think you're right. We're just living longer now, it seems like. So that's kind of why it seems to be. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but we got to stay active the best way that we can.
Right. Right.
So, how long ago was your mother diagnosed with dementia? I was just curious.
Oh, well, she was diagnosed when she was, she wasn't really diagnosed.
Oh, I gotcha.
We just knew it because she started, having memory problems. It's interesting because people often think, oh, you got Alzheimer's, but dementia is kind of a term for the symptoms. There's lots of different types of dementia, and one of them is Alzheimer's. And the Alzheimer's Association not only, impacts and helps people with, Alzheimer's, is also with the dementia, like it's vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's. Anyway, I'm sorry, what you had a question?
No, I just went, wow, when you said Louis. I've heard some people getting that, and that affects your ability to even walk.
Yes, yes. And I recently, we have a neighbor. As you age, you find more and more people that, if it's not a loved one, it's a relative or a friend that has it, and you can see different. It affects people different ways, and what's hard with a caregiver is that they can get very resistant. Now, just think, if you have been, as an adult, making decisions your whole life and have your life set, and then all of a sudden your world gets confusing, and then somebody steps in and says, I'm going to help you, and they start making decisions for you, probably going to resist. And that's what happened with my mother, and that's what happens with most people. They kind of get, dig their heels in. I don't want to do it. And it's hard because you have to try to convince them and say, you're doing it because you love them, you want to support them. But they don't want to follow your directions. So it's really difficult. And the way to deal with them is, to be patient and not argue. When my mother first got it, I had some aunts. My mother would say things that were really not true, and in her world they were.
Right.
And yeah, and they would argue with her. You can't do that, and you can't reason with them. It's just the way it is. And then also as a caregiver, you usually have to realize you can't think about the past and think, oh, the way it used to be, how she used to react. Look at the way she is now. Deal with it now. You have to, as most people, as me, that I'm older now, you deal with the now. This is the way it is. This is your chapter of your life. And you just have to do the best you can. And that's the way a caregiver has to think about the person that they're helping.
Make
That,
me think of the word being present. You need to be present with them in what capacity they think they're in right now, right? That would
right,
help make
right.
it calmer situation.
Yeah. And like in conversations, they might say something weird. Oh, you'll just have to say, oh, okay. Uh, say, oh, I talked to my mother last night on the phone. I'll say, okay, what did you talk about? Or she'll say, oh, my father passed away several years before her. And she'd say, oh, Daddy couldn't join us today for lunch because he had to work late. I was, oh, that's too bad. And, but, what I did is I tried to talk about the past because that's what they can remember. It's the present that they have trouble with.
Mhm.
And my mother, I found out all sorts of things about her relatives from the past, her brothers and sisters. And then also I would bring albums, because like she can remember like past vacations or birthdays or things that happened, and that makes them feel better because that's a connection you can make with them.
It's true. So I guess your experience obviously motivated you to write this book. And
Absolutely.
we need to talk more about this because you mentioned it's becoming more common, but it's going to help people understand the proper or the best way to deal with this. And
Yes.
so what actually motivated you? I mean, you actually share, I didn't read your book, but you share all the stories obviously with just your mother or
Yes, this is different. It'll I started with a blog.
okay.
um I after I retired, I started writing, and I joined a class in um, memory, and also I started writing poetry. And then I thought I'm going to start writing a blog, and so I took a class on how to do a blog, and so I started writing things about my life. And then that's when my mother started having memory problems. So I started writing about her, and each thing that I wrote ended up being a chapter in the book.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah, and when I published the blog, it was interesting because I got all sorts of feedback from people all over the United States and even some from foreign countries. And they'd say, oh, that sounds just like my mother or just like my father. And I realized that I was relating to these people. And I think sometimes you see a list of like symptoms or things like this is what dementia looks like. But this is a narrative that actually shows what I went through and the things that my mother did. And I think some of them, and this is what people always say, wonder about, I say, and sometimes it can be humorous because even though it is a very serious, condition, it can be funny. Like the time I was called by her assisted living, and they said, your mother won't go back in her room because she said there's a snake in there. She's always been deathly afraid of snakes. And so I said, okay, I'll come over. So I drove over to the assisted living and said, Mom, I'm going to check the room. So I went in the room and pretended like I was looking under the beds and everything. And after a few minutes, I came back out and I said, Mom, I think the snake left. it's okay. He probably went out the door
Right.
and said, you can come back in. So then she came back in. Um, but there's different things that they do that, it's very tragic. You have to go along with it. And, I was the major caregiver because I lived closer. I lived about an hour and a half away. And my family, I live in California, and my family, the rest, my sister and brother live in Arizona. And my sister would try to come over as often as she could. But I was the one that would check on her. And thank goodness I had retired by then, so I had the time.
Right.
Um, and I did not have my mother live with me. I really admire people that have their parents can live with them. My mother's very independent, and it just wouldn't have worked with the two of us. It,
Right. That's
you
true.
know,
Keep
and,
that independence, right?
yes. And, anyway, so she came. Uh, I tried to get one of those life things that ring when you're having a problem. You wear around your neck, life light or something like that. And she wouldn't wear it. She says, I don't need that. So that's what her resistance. And so what happened is one day I got a phone call from her minister. He said, I'm trying to get in the house because I think your mother is injured, because a parishioner called me and said she'd been trying to get a hold of her. And so he said, I don't have a key. Do you want me to break the door down, or what do you want me to do? So I gave him the name of a neighbor that had the key, which is always good. Especially, if you have an older relative or anybody, I think it's a good idea to give a neighbor a key in case something happens. So he called later and said, yes, I found your mother. She was on the floor. She tried to get something out of the refrigerator and she fell and she couldn't get to the phone. So this is exactly an example of, the resistance, but yet you have to keep going. And she ended up breaking her hip. And when she went through rehabilitation, we said, we'll bring her down where I live. So it'll be easier for me to check up on her. So that's what we did. And then we ended up putting in her assisted living. And then she wanted to go back home. A lot of them, they want to go home. But when she went home, I contacted several different caregiver organizations, and found someone, and we set it up that they would go there the next week. And the next week and said, we tried to talk to your mother. We went to her house and said, we're here to come in and help you. And she says, I don't need any help. And she sent him away. So, it's hard, but you just have to keep persisting. And she eventually ended up back near me. And the last assisted living place, uh, she did fine. She liked it.
That's good. I think it also helps to have a family member like you, one of her daughters, because she knows you and trusts you.
Right. And luckily, now some people don't recognize, their relatives, but my mother
Okay.
did.
Right.
She, um, but I have a website. What happened is after I wrote my book, I changed the website into, a resource for people. I did lots of research on dementia. And so I put articles about dementia that I'd read about, and also what my experiences were, and maybe things that could help people. And one of them, and if people go to the website, they can get these resources. And one of them is something people should think about right now. If they are getting older, or if they have a relative that's getting older, you've got to prepare. And there's certain things that you need to have ready. My mother and father were very organized, but sometimes somebody has papers like, if you go in and have somebody that's disorganized, you might not know where their bank account is. You might not know where the deeds to the house are. Um, they might not have a power of attorney. You need to get, if your parent gets older, you need to get that power of attorney. So in case something happens, it will be ready for them because they might resist getting it later. Because I know that I wanted my mother's bank accounts consolidated. And so we went to the bank and I wish she to the bank that I wanted to take money out of so I could put it in another bank. And I told the woman that that's what we wanted to take out the money. And she understood. She said, okay, we can do that. But then she turned to my mother and said, would you like to do that? My mother said, no. And that went over several times. So finally she agreed. So this is why I really tell people right now, as they're aging or their parents are, you need to have that talk and say, I'd like to have you get these things together. So in case something happens, it's a hard talk because you're talking about them getting ill or disabled or dying. And you really, you need to have that talk and have them to get their things together. And I know for myself, I've had to, pull things together, which I've learned from having to take care of my mother.
Right, it's definitely I agree with that, being prepared, and the power of attorney is so important, what you brought up, especially your mom is she's I should say single, but your father had passed away. So
Right.
everything you've got to set those documents up, you got to have especially the financial stuff. Otherwise it'd be a mess long term. It takes longer than anyone
Yeah.
expected
Yeah.
to clean it up.
I had to take my mother's bills. Oh, do my mother's bills. And that was hard. She argued with me, but I was afraid that she would, well, because she didn't. They would, electric company would call her and say, you haven't paid your bill.
They'll
you
cut
know,
it off, right?
yeah. So you can't, like where we live, we have a lot of retired people. And a lot of times they move away from their hometown. Their children are still back there. But it's important for people to keep in contact with how their parent is doing. Because a lot of times you don't know what's happening, and they might have their gas cut off or their electricity or something. So you need to be aware of these things for an older person.
That is really good points. Definitely helping them pay the bills, get a power of attorney, have access to their financial accounts, and then also getting help where you can, because you can't do it all yourself, Kathy. It's
Right, right, yes.
that's difficult. So, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for you that to share? It doesn't have to be one takeaway. What you've learned
Okay.
from all of this.
All right. I think you need to be an advocate. If your parent has problems like this, you need to be an advocate for them because they can't for themselves. You know, be aware of how things are going. I won't say what it is because it's in my book. People can read my book.
Right.
But we had a problem with a caregiver, and I happened to catch this problem, and it turned into a major problem. But older people can be taken advantage of. You know,
Yes, you're
older
right.
Here people nowadays with all the scams and the calling on the phone of people trying to get money from them or get their bank account number or credit card. And yeah, you have to be aware and be an advocate while you're taking care of them, but also in other ways too.
That is
So,
so true. But
yes,
you mentioned the scam stuff. I've had not me, but my mother who was called by it's just fake stuff. Like they were
yes,
helping her tech stuff for one of her financial accounts. Well, it was fake, right? And thank
I,
God she called me and my brother. We're like, no,
uh,
they're not going to call you to get access to
yes,
your. I mean, I'm just thankful that
yeah,
because she was, I don't know, very stressed out about it. But there's just so many scams out there, and I think as you were talking, the AI stuff, how voices can sound like one of your relatives or something, they can do that.
yes.
We have code. We created code words, Kathy. I
Oh,
should call them code words, but if
yeah,
some scam, that's what I did with my mother. because if they're pretending to be Bridget, you need to, hopefully she would remember this, but I meant, a code word. Does that make sense? But
Yes.
if they have dementia though, they might not remember that aspect.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, like with little children, you tell them a code word so they won't be kidnapped. I can
Correct.
see it applying to people that as they get older too, or anybody. I mean, I get all these things all the time. I had to be aware of. Yeah,
Correct. It's right. They're targeting not just your parents, but targeting you or your siblings. It's just crazy and how we need to be, I shouldn't say crazy, but it's real. We need to be aware in it and just help each other as a community and like you're parenting a parent. That is unbelievable that you had to go through that. So far I haven't. But you never know because it could just happen. And the women on both sides of my family live a long time. Lord help me. I I have joked with my sons they're gonna have to hopefully not take care of me because they live a long time on both sides. It's just the longevity and maybe I was just thinking you said your father had passed away before she had dementia. Do you think that had something attributed to it maybe? Because she was alone maybe?
just 12. It had been 12
Oh,
years.
okay. So that could have
My
built
mother-
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my mother lived to 96.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. And so you just being alone can affect like you said, you
Yeah.
gotta be mentioned earlier, get out and
Right.
be socialized some shape or form. And I've noticed a lot of, I shouldn't say assisted living, but senior living homes, they need to be together. They need to be, have access to activities.
Right. The really good ones do that. They have activities, and you'll go in and it will usually be a lot of pictures and music for that generation.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good
yeah.
point. I didn't think
Like I think if I went into one, it'd probably be rock and roll,
right, right,
instead of
right.
the oldies with the big band era type of thing. You know, they- and it's yeah, they have to be careful though. There are agencies, and I would recommend if anybody wants to put their parent in assisted living to go to one of these agencies. Um, that help place a person in assisted living because they know the ins and outs of all these different assisted living places and what would be the best fit, because there's some that are private ones that maybe are in it more for the profit, but
Right.
there are many good ones. um but that's what I think you need to have somebody that really knows about them, and then you visit them. Uh, I took my mother around to different ones, and that's the other thing. As much as possible, get them to be in on the decision making as much as you can.
Because they're the ones that are going to be staying there, and you
Right,
can get their reaction when they're there, right? You can see how they're feeling. Or
right.
that's a great idea. I never thought about that an agency to help you do that because you don't want to guess, right?
Yes.
Might pick. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. There are several that I think I mentioned. I know there's some that if you go on their website, they have lots of good information too,
Mhm.
for caregivers. Yeah, a place for mom is one of them that I've used, but there's lots of other ones.
I'm sure there's regulations too based on states. That's kind of why you need an agent involved, maybe, because I would think if you're moving a parent from, I'm just because my mom lives in a different state now. That's why I was thinking that you might have to have there's some legal aspect too, moving from one state to another. Uh,
Right,
there's just so many. You just want to do the right thing.
right. Yeah, whether move them near you or, a lot of times if you have a whole family, you can't
Oh
move
Lord,
near them, but it's as they get more of, with their memory problems, it's a little easier to move them closer
that's
to
true.
you, because they really don't. Everything as they get with more of dementia symptoms, their road becomes closer. And like for geography is one of the things that they have problems with.
Okay,
Things not, we think of the whole world, And as it gets closer in, if they have problems and they think of the state, the city, then for them it's like their block, where they live. That's all they can really relate to.
Wow, this is a tough thing that we're having to deal with. And not just the United States, right? Is it global that we
Oh,
have this issue?
right, right. Yeah, as I say, I've talked to other people from other countries. And but what's great is, and I'll say this, people always thought at the beginning that, oh, we'll just get a pill and then, it'll go away. That's not true. They're still working on it. It's and this what if people look at read my website, they'll see the actual causes for it. I don't want to go into that now. But scientists are finding out more and more, and there's scientists all over the world. There are 33 research scientists in the United States, and they collaborate, which is good. And there are some medications out there, but they only are good for people that are at the beginning stages of dementia.
Right. Wow, this is a very important topic, and it just gives me chills a little bit just because you don't know who, what, when, where it could happen to anybody, right?
Right.
And that's what happened to your mother.
Right, right. As I say, you just prepare. You're living in the now, but prepare, for what possibly could happen.
You just right, don't know. This is so really helpful. So, Kathy, where can people learn more about you? You mentioned your website.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my website, kathybjork.com. And I do presentations. I know you're way over there, but
Oh,
really I love to do presentations, to be able to get out and see more people.
we could probably, yeah, we could schedule another call and you can do a presentation on it and put it on my YouTube channel because I think people need to understand this more, even me, right? I
Right.
I know enough to be dangerous. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of I shouldn't say that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's important. I never thought about getting an agent involved or someone assisting you to do all this because it is so complicated, I'm sure.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's right. It's not just their mental health, it's just everything they're going to leave behind.
Right.
And
Right.
you don't want to make it too hard on you when they do
Mhm.
pass away. But well, those that are listening, I'll include the link to her website in the description section. And can you tell us, everybody, again, the name of your book so they can look for it? I'll have the
Oh,
link.
my mother is losing her memory. I'm losing my mind. Parenting the aging parent.
I love that. I mean, it's very to the point and makes
Yeah.
very intriguing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll include a link to that as well in the description.
Okay.
Thank, thank you again so much, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.